To our visual studies session here. Okay, so yeah, I've had a pretty rough night. My youngest kid fell down the stairs, so that was quite a frightening kind of thing. He's okay. He's all right. He's cool. We're keeping him off school today. Yeah, no, oh my God, I've never felt more terrified in my life. So, yeah, he's doing okay. He's doing all right. Man, I have never moved faster in my life. I swear to God. Yeah, he's doing okay. He's chilling out. He's playing Roblox. Yeah, yeah, man. It's yeah. So you can imagine, I had my heart in my stomach for most of the night, and it was really, really hard to fall asleep. No, he's good. He's good. Thank you. He's all right. He's cool. Um, Roblox makes everything better. Yeah, yeah. It's quite funny because he was right on. We was right on us buying him Robux as we're kind of making sure he's okay. So the little opportunist knows how to play his. You know how to play your cards, don't you, kid?
Dad,
Yeah.
how do you spell out 15K followers?
15K.
Followers.
1 5 and then K, right?
Followers.
FOLL.
Okay, hold on, I know
All right. Okay,
Wait.
you're gonna have to try and sound it out, buddy. So yeah, we'll probably be interrupted a fair bit. Um, yeah, so I think we were lucky. We're lucky he's okay. He's doing all right. So I tell you, I never moved more faster in my life. So as a result, I'm going to be a little bit tired today and a little bit sketchy, but we'll try and kind of work through it. Hence why I needed to go get my coffee. Yeah. All right. So I think a good place to start, guys, would be to pick up where we left off last time. As per usual, as promised, let's continue breaking down the Diablo trailer, right? So a couple of different caveats about this sort of visual studies module, right? We're going to probably be investigating a lot of various different types of imagery, right? So not only are we going to be looking at things, we'll have to take a look at things that appeal to the cartoon production side of things, maybe discuss very, very briefly sort of imagery that children can relate to and things like that. And we'll go right across the gamut to things that have sort of violent, satanic kind of... But I mean, you guys play video games and stuff like that. We're not going to be talking about stuff that's any worse than that. I just have to kind of put that out there to make sure that there isn't any sort of sensibilities that I might be sort of crossing. But hopefully everyone's pretty open-minded and stuff. I only mention this because I was teaching visual studies, 5 years ago? And there was an anonymous report put against me because of my presentation of skulls. Well, which is not a big deal. It's totally cool. I got it. I understood it, right? So, I just had to be fairly sensitive about skulls and demons. There was a particular student who had sort of difficulty with that kind of imagery, which is cool. I totally respect that. There's nothing wrong with that. But one of the things that I kind of encourage that we do is that we treat all imagery with respect from an artist's point of view, right? So we will kind of investigate a lot of different things. Now, part and parcel to that, we will be engaging with life drawing. Yeah, skulls are okay. Skulls are all good, right? Here's the thing, right? This is the best metaphor that I can kind of give in terms of my approach to art, right? So I love guns, right? I absolutely love guns. Not the real ones, but the fake ones, right? So, I love playing with Hollywood prop guns, prop weaponry, and things like that, and just using my imagination. I like guns I don't like guns that make realistic sounds. Pop, pop, pop. I love the guns that have been sound designed so that when you pull the trigger, it's like, you know, I just love that. But the real thing, no, I don't really support or like the real thing. So it seems like almost a hypocritical dichotomy, but no, because the symbology is used differently, right? For me, it's all about escapist fiction, fun, John Wick style, kind of beat 'em up, you know? So I carry that distinction into everything, right? We should be unafraid to investigate a lot of the visuals that, you know, like we can be horror movie fanatics. That's another good example. We can be horror movie fanatics. We can like, you know, Jason and Freddy and Mike Myers and all that kind of stuff. Doesn't mean we necessarily condone serial killing. It's just enjoyment, right? So that's my fake stuff is greater than real stuff. Is that grammatically correct? For this class, I'll call that grammatically correct. But by that same token, when we do life drawing as well, we'll be studying the human nude, both the male and the female nude. And the one thing, you guys are relatively cool. I'm getting a sense that you guys are pretty cool so far, but you know, no snide remarks, no comments, no, you know, we take it seriously from the point of view of artists. So we'll be investigating things like human anatomy, but then when we go across and we start taking a look at, well, not just horror imagery, but all kinds of imagery. You know, I will be, or, you know, we should be unafraid of religious or political imagery. Why? Well, because politics and religion isn't effective storytelling. We're watching Diablo that has crosses and churches and stuff everywhere. Politics is in things like Star Wars. You know, the Empire was designed based on neo-Nazis, right? So we have to be kind of unafraid of these complex issues because we're not discussing them. We're using them to create escapist fiction, right? So yeah, we'll be touching on life drawing today. So that's just my little kind of disclaimer at the beginning of any kind of visual studies module or course. I've oftentimes been asked what my opinion was or is to this day on censorship, right? Because it really closely ties to what I'm talking about this morning. For me, the rule is relatively simple. I like the representation of a thing, not the thing itself, right? So, you know, the quickest example I can give is I like fictional death, not snuff films, right? So for me, that's what art is. It's a representation or it's a visual metaphor of very complex ideas, whether it be moral questions or what have you. You know, loosely, and I'm sure if I thought about it, sat down and thought about it deeply, I could come up with examples that break my own rule. But generally, that's where I come from. And in that regard, no topic is off the table, right? I also don't really. I'm crossing over into the political. Snuff is an actual thing that people kind of video and stuff like that. It's horrifying, right? Yeah, it's revolting to say. But you know, sort of in that regard, I think, you know, in academia and in a university setting, we should be unafraid of talking about complex ideas, right? If there isn't a safe forum like university to talk about a variety of different subjects, where else are you going to talk about it, right? And I think there's this real hunger for this kind of intellectual discourse where there isn't these barriers of censorship or self-censorship that I think is appealing, right? So, you know, having said that, we got to be careful. Language is incredibly powerful. We always have to be really quite careful with that. But let's tread lightly and discover complex, sophisticated ideas, no matter what it is, right? And I will represent the safety levers, right? So, I guess that's the best way to describe it, right? You are welcome to explore any ideas or ideology that you wish, provided it's for application of a fictional nature, and I'll be operating as a guide, right? And that sort of a thing. I was on a train of thought and I completely lost it now. Because I'm reading the chat at the same time that I'm trying to talk to you guys. let's kind of move forward and understand that the imagery and the symbology that we use, we shouldn't really be afraid of, right? So, and we should be open to kind of discussing ideas, right? Okay. All right, so let me make sure I'm streaming the correct screen here. So I'm going to set up my Twitch display, and I'll also stream it here on Discord as well, so you guys can check it out. So I'm going to pop over here. And this content may be inappropriate for children. And I'll pop over in here. And let's get going. All right. So this is not going to be a watch through. This is going to be more of a walkthrough, right? So I will kind of explain a lot of the visuals that are being used in tandem, right? So I rushed through this before. Now, this is an incredibly powerful opening scene in a number of different ways because of the compact information that it is portraying, right? So first of all, how do you create depth in a scene? And I'll be talking about this in the separate compositional lecture, right? Because what we are combating against, the first and foremost, as artists in the entertainment media, my new computer still ain't here, so I gotta use chat till then. Okay. So, yeah, well, this is being saved for posterity on my Twitch stream. Well, the Twitch stream's got it for 8 days. I'll post up the YouTube link. It's also concurrently streaming to my YouTube link where it holds onto the videos for a little bit longer. So, one of the biggest things that we battle against as commercial artists is what's called the proscenium space. That is the screen, right? And whether we like it or not, oh, I cut out for 20 seconds, did I? Okay. Was that here on Discord? Or was that on my Twitch stream? Discord. Okay. All right, so you guys can hear me now, right? All good? Okay, so I'll say again, the biggest thing that we're battling against is what's called the proscenium space, or the 2D flat plane, right? So no matter how we'd like to think about all the artwork that we portray, everything ends up flat and two-dimensional, right? And therefore, if we have flat imagery, we are maintaining that emotional barrier between us and our audience, right? So how do we break through that fourth wall? Breaking the fourth wall is a different thing, but how do we break through that proscenium wall, that screen? Well, we have to try to convince our audience that they are looking through a window, not through a screen, and that there is three-dimensional space that they can walk into. And we do that by creating a sense of depth. The sense of depth pulls your audience into the story because they're visually walking into the landscape. So here's the first trick. The use of foreground, midground, background. You will hear me say that constantly. It's my number one weapon in compositional design and in storyboard design. I am always thinking in terms of foreground, midground, background. You will see it straight away. Foreground objects are darker and more saturated. Midground has the perfect balance of tone and color, and then the background is desaturated and slightly less contrasty, right? So here's the foreground, midground cut through here, and then the background. The background is sort of desaturated and defocused for a condition called atmospheric scattering, which I'll talk about later, sometimes called the Rayleigh effect. But we'll study that not only in compositional design, but when we get into rendering and lighting and all kinds of other stuff. So there's a reason we have that sort of desaturated look, right? So that's the first weapon. We also have a left to right read, and we also have rule of thirds, which I'll talk about in the compositional lecture. We start with the biggest thing in the frame. Hitchcock once said that the importance of an object is directly proportional to its size it takes on the screen. So this cross is really important because, hey, it's Diablo. We're talking about the devil, or Lilith at any rate, but some sort of satanic minion incarnate, right? So here we have, in the other rule of thirds, the abandoned village in the distance. And we have mist and fog sort of creating that separation. The mountain is really important to show that this area is secluded. Nobody really knows it's there, or it's difficult to get to this place, right? We have from the cross some very interesting devices going on here. So we have from the cross this leading line with the water. Look at where it kind of goes. It's leading us towards this village, sort of, right? In a very, very subtle way. And then we've got this darker saturated element here, tufts of wild grass or something like that. And that's just to sort of notice these lines that are curving this way. It's sort of pulling us downwards towards that village. So everything's like, hey man, go to this village, right? Everything's sort of pointing to it. Now, it's not like this is the only way to set this up. There are a few different things you can do. If you wanted to be super fancy, you could have the cross dead center of the frame and the camera travel through the center of the cross with the village kind of framed in here, or, stuff like that. And oftentimes, concept artists will thumbnail out their shots and try various different ways of getting into the shot. So the director, I might have gone, okay, well, let's concept this. Let's actually have the cross dead center of the frame. The village may be inside the circle, and then the camera travels through the circle. And then I'll speak with the director, and the director says, no, I want to fool the audience, give them a nice sedate scene to lull them into a false sense of security before I hit them with the next shot. Right? Which is the bang, bang, wake it up. Some wonderful things happening here. Some techniques you probably don't realize. We have a tiny burn to white. Do you guys know what a burn to white is? It's the opposite of a fade to black, right? So watch this, very, very subtle, right? I'll start, where'd I go? Right here again, right? So we come up, and we start burning to white. You see that? Very subtle burn to white, right? So what does a burn to white do, right? So a burn to white is common for happy endings. Very common for happy endings, right? Because it sort of mimics this heavenly glow kind of thing, right? So do you see how they contrasted the power of the cut? Nice sedate background, they relax you, even though the imagery is very derelict and barren looking. And then we start this slow burn to white, almost as if you're about to hit a happy ending, and then bang, right into the next shot. Really, that's just so clever. I love it. And you bet your ass that was designed on purpose, right? So yeah. So oftentimes what we have in creative discussions is we might have two shots working really well together. And then we'll sit down and go, well, now how can we make that more powerful? What are the tiny dials and switches that we can do to just make it stronger, make that contrast stronger? I don't know, let's do a slight burn to white before we bang to the next cut. Let's start with a cut on the shutter door and then move it over. So we're constantly talking about how can we make that much more powerful than it actually is in a very, very subtle way, right? So we talked about the shutter banging, right? So this is a wonderful curtain reveal. I don't know what body wipe, it's sometimes called a body wipe or an object wipe. I like to call it a curtain reveal because it's like theater curtains opening, right? So we're actually using the props in the scene to act as theater curtains, and we're about to be introduced to the story, right? This opening shot has loads of backstory, right? So notice how we had the cross on the left-hand side of the previous shot. Well, we have our brightest heavenly glow on the left-hand side as well, right? So it's leading our eye from left to right. We've got the obviously derelict building, creating just a nice silhouette, and we've got this creepy tree with no leaves. The creepy tree works all the time, the tree with no leaves, because it's the most common kind of iconography for Halloween. We are used to it. We're used to seeing it. We understand that it's a signifier of death, right? So just having a barren, leafless tree works every single time. We can see graves clearly, and the graves are the shape of crosses. Now, trust me, there were meetings about what shape the graves should be. I reckon, I shouldn't actually prejudge the concept artists working on this, but maybe they started as your typical headstone, right? So just your inverted U, right? And then somebody said, well, let's use the cross. It's got a better silhouette. Okay, and then I'll draw crosses in the background or something, right? And the reason why the crosses work with a better silhouette is because you need the audience to pick it up on a subconscious level. You don't want the audience looking there, but you want that religious symbolism to be picked up very subconsciously, a split second before you actually see the church, right? So we see the church. Why is that church important? Well, we'll talk about a few different things, right? The another compositional rule that I will talk about in the composition lecture is that contrast always draws the eye. Always. Contrast is your greatest weapon for creating focus. Now think about it. What are you looking at in this shot? It's revealed in the center shot. So we got 1 point perspective working for us to a certain degree. We also have compositional weighting. So we've got the largest object here, and then the next largest object here. So we're sort of zigzagging through the composition towards the church. But let's take a look at the contrast on the church, right? It is the area of highest contrast in the shot. The highest area of extreme light against extreme dark. That will always draw the eye. So this is a trick that I'll talk to you a little bit more about creating focus in your own artwork, right? In your own drawings and things like that, and how to direct attention so that your audience is looking where they need to be looking. So, and of course we've got the sound effects, and we got a very, very clear silhouette of a steeple, right? That's unmistakable what that is. Yes, the negative space outlines it clearly. Something that I want to mention about negative space, because a lot of people sometimes get this wrong. Negative space does not need to be created by nothing. Negative space can be created by a low contrast texture, right? So in the background we have that low contrast mountain sort of thing, but it's effectively acting as negative space. So yes, absolutely right. So that's carving out that image as well, right? Wonderful sort of glimpse of the vegetation growing against the side of this derelict. So it indicates that this place has been derelict so long, the vegetation is overgrowing it. Seems simple when we see it, but you'd be surprised at the number of people who forget to take that into account. I've seen derelict village models created in CG before, and nothing's overgrown it. And it still works, but remember, we have discussions about how can we make it more powerful? How can we just jam-pack as much story information as we can into a half-second shot, right? Okay, so we start hearing the priest, and it's a panicked voice. And we talked a little about this, the omniscient view, the God's eye view, the light coming from hell. Here's another real simple thing that I see people make mistakes all the time, especially in CG, and it's really, really important that I mention this. Those pews are not placed exactly 90 degrees. They are not placed perfectly parallel to each other. That's the biggest dead giveaway that something is CG, right? When angles are perfect and lines are perfect, right? So oftentimes, if you guys remember the Maya lecture, I talk about snapping at 90 degrees and all this kind of stuff, right? That is part of the process. That is necessary for working in an environment as mathematically rich as Maya and things like that, where a lot of construction methodology depends on being able to use those mathematical tools. But once you get your props done and placed mathematically, you have to go in again with the artist's eye and go, well, now I'm going to tweak these things here and there, move them ever so slightly, make them look like human beings have placed them everywhere. Not, makes it more organic, or a force of nature, like perhaps some wind knocked that, or some explosion, or something knocked that pew backwards, right? So you gotta, I'm just stopping now because I might go a bit too far. You have to start thinking about the story that happened inside your environment to make those things sit where they are, right? Pew pew. Ha ha ha. Oh my God, too early for that joke. So we'll talk about storytelling and environment design because it's absolutely important. Nobody here today should ever arbitrarily place something in a room. Don't do it, right? because it sticks out as being arbitrary. Okay, Last of Us, by the way, got that right. Their environment guys and their prop guys and their level Ds really, really know how to create a sense of a play space where something has happened. And then there's a story inside the play space. All right, so I'm very cognizant. I don't want this to take up our entire time, but I tend to go on and on because I love shot design. Okay, so arguably, for me, this was the worst composition in the whole sequence because when the camera moved to this, I had a split second of, what am I looking at? And I think it was partially because perhaps the sound design gave me an expectation that I'd be looking at the characters straight away. Because the proximity of the sound design of the characters' dialogue, especially when I had headphones on, was that they were right there, right? So maybe that was it. It was also sort of, it's hard to understand looking down a dark hole when you're looking at a bird's eye view because it flattens the perspective, right? So what would I maybe do to fix this? Well, also, there's no motion, right? So motion is the other thing that tends to draw the eye. Okay, it's good that a couple of, that Tom, you thought that this was hard to read at first. Yeah, I had a moment where, what am I looking at? Now, they solve it because the camera does a rush down the hole, and you're like, oh yeah, it's a hole, and you're going down it, right? But I did have a split second, right? Huge hole in the middle. Yeah, I know. How can you miss the huge hole in the middle of the floor? Couple of things I would do. Okay, so there's digging implements here. Now, they're cool. Maybe they wanted you to get confused. No, I can emphatically say that, right? So, bad compositional design. Now, composition designers or shot designers never want you to be confused. They want you feeling a particular way deliberately, right? And why I can say that confidently is this story moment is not a moment where you should be like, I'm confused. It's different when you shoot a fight sequence and your main character gets hit and it's the POV of the main character and you have no idea what you're looking at. Things are blurring out. Things are going to Dutch tilt. So yeah, that would be, as a shot designer, I want you as the audience to be confused because the character is. Do you see what I mean? But in this case, right, it's crystal clear. The shot designers are like, there's a deep, dark hole, and those guys are in that hole. That's the message that you want to give. And I can tell, because there are clues. They put these digging implements there to show that this hole has just been dug, right? But they're not clear. So I might have experimented a little bit with the material, with the metallic material, because it's living in the same tonal space as everything around it. So I didn't even see these digging implements the first time I watched it, right? So the other thing I would do is a slight flickering torchlight that fades out down in there. Just a flicker torchlight fades out, right? So that I would be like, okay, so not only would that torchlight would give me a contrast in color and saturation, but contrast in tone, but also more clearly delineate the hole so I could see straight away that's a hole, right? And that flickering light that fades away would indicate to me that somebody's down there, right? I would immediately associate it with torchlight. Right? So that's the little thing I might have added to this. Not taking away from this trailer, guys, because I think it's a perfect trailer. But this one shot, yeah, I would have done differently. Okay. And then, whoosh. So we go diving down that hole, right? And this is a wonderful fade to black. Perfect opportunity for a title screen, right? Now, I would have lengthened that hole just a bit to allow the camera to travel a beat longer, just to give me the feeling I'm dropping down this hole. I felt it was really quick. And then title screen. Yeah, it's definitely just a heartbeat quick. So now let's talk about this next shot because I think it's really cool. So they bookended the two shots, which is fantastic, right? So now we're still looking at a bird's eye view, right? Yes. And where we were looking before, that hole was where the altar was. So the altar has become whole, which has now become this symbol. Right? You don't need to know what that symbol is. It's an inverted triangle. We're somewhat familiar with satanic imagery and things like that. So it's not good. Satan's triangle. There we go. But look at what they're doing. Where are our guys running? Remember I said that the light coming from the bottom was an indication of hell? So this is beautiful. Our guys are running into hell. And it's really super subtle. But we're trying to tell the audience, that these guys are going someplace not good, right? Away from the triangles pointing towards the firelight. Yeah. So that's really, really cool. But also, we are doing a push in, right? Yeah, you guys might not have noticed it the first time, but have a look at what the camera is doing, right? Right? It's a slight push in on the triangle. Why? It's a path? Sort of. I think I see. Yeah, to give it significance, it's a path. We want to talk about the functionality, actually, of that triangle, right? But yeah, let's put it this way. It's significant. We wanted to show that because it factors later on in the story, right? Does he bleed on it? Yes. Yeah, does, right? Factors into it. Not this particular triangle, but one inside the temple, right? So it is important, right? It also gives a little bit of a sense of what might be waiting for our characters, right? Oh. So I want to talk a little bit about the next shot because it's jam-packed with story. Okay. So what do we know that's going on? They be running. We got that in the shot before. What's going on in this shot? One of them is injured. Yeah, so that's straightforward. Running from things. One man helping the other. It's beyond one man helping the other. Right? We know that these guys are maybe not necessarily friends, but they like each other. We also know that the guy on the right has a good nature about him. Why do we know the guy on the right, helping the priest, has a good nature? How do we know he's compassionate? He hasn't actually done anything compassionate. No, not the priest. The guy helping the priest. Arguably the leader of the thieves. He's helping the wounded, that's one. There's another clue. There's another person who runs past. Yes. Saying what? What do they say? Yeah, he says, leave him. Leave him. And our main character doesn't. The only one who's caring about it. Yes. Oh, you can't hear the trailer. Okay, so this guy runs past, says, leave him, right? So that is like a 2-second shot. 2-second shot. We know we've got one character who's wounded. We know the other character, a load about him now. We know he's compassionate. We know he's helping the leader. We know that when the character running by says leave him, this character ignores that. We also know that the third character running by saying leave him is probably a knob, right? All in just like a second or two shot. We've got all that storytelling. right? All of that storytelling. Now, it's leveraging cliche to a certain degree. And I want to, I don't know, an idiot, I'm trying to, I swear a lot in normal life when I'm speaking, and I'm trying to kind of guard my language a little bit. Uh-oh. Conversation is evolving. So, well, one of the things I want you guys to understand is sometimes cliche is not something to be afraid of. In certain situations, you need to leverage cliche or use it to a certain degree to compact your storytelling and tell it very, very quickly. The one thing you should never do is to use cliche at face value. You need to use it as anything in your toolkit, as something that helps you tell an engaging, original, unique story, right? Okay, so now this is really important. They are running left to right. It's cliche after cliche after cliche. Yes, yeah. The other thing about balancing cliches as well is understanding your target demographic to a certain degree, right? So this is sort of important because it ties to what I was saying before about the obligatory scene or the promise of the premise. Or you don't do a superhero movie and not put in a knockdown, drag-out superhero fight with a villain. You gotta have that in there, right? A city-destroying battle of some kind, right? It's gotta be in there. Because to a certain degree, what cliche helps to sort of tentpole is the spectacle, right? And, there's arguments that movies have become too much about spectacle, but to a certain degree, I want my spectacle. I'd like it kind of encapsulated in a very deep, wonderfully thematic story that leaves me thinking, right? But, when I step into an Avengers movie, I want that, but I also want spectacle. It's kind of what they buy the tickets to see it for. Yes and no. Yes and no. I'm looking for a Raiders of the Lost Ark again and again and again, right? So Raiders of the Lost Ark is wonderful because, to a certain extent, Raiders of the Lost Ark is wonderful because it's a visual effects extravaganza, but it's just this wonderful story about Indiana Jones's, personal journey, right? So, And again, when you're selecting the movies, you're selecting them for a reason. What I don't like is when the cliches don't serve the movie, or the movie relies too heavily on the genre conventions and the cliche, i.e. the Warcraft movie. Oh my God. How can you take a property like Warcraft that's so rich with possibility and then just make this huge fan service movie? And it's not just my opinion. Critics have just lambasted it for its light touch on what could have been a really powerful movie. Right? To be honest, full disclosure, I haven't finished watching it. I watched Act 1 and went, wow, I can't watch this. But I will watch the rest of it, right? One of the things that you may find when you start doing this professionally is you'll also watch bad movies as well. Some people might go, well, I'll never get that 2 hours of my life back. But it's important. It's important that you study what particular films got wrong, in addition to those that you like, and et cetera, et cetera. So best kind of movies. They're my guilty pleasures. Not everything has to be Citizen Kane, man. I swear to God. It's like when you go into a film lecture theater or you talk to film students and things like that, everything has to be Citizen Kane, or everything has to be elevated, or everything has to be like, that's like, no, man, you can have this huge alien creature burst out of a scientific facility and pieces go flying everywhere and the main character's going, my God, what are we going to do? And that kind of stuff I love, right? It's the whole reason and I'm sure a lot of you out there choose this particular type of commercial entertainment art as an industry you want to devote your life to. Because let's face it, it's all about demons, monsters, weapons, bravery, all kinds of... No, what did I say? Joshua and the Promised... Oh, okay. Everything's... Joshua and the Promised Land. Okay, I'll check it out. I will check it out. Okay, I'm going to continue... Oh, it's something for a movie. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to continue, right? Now, I love the threat reveal in this. I love the threat reveal. So I want to really talk about it, right? How cool is that? That was so cool. Oh, man. Right? Let's talk about that. Okay, so now we've got a camera move tracking up and to the right, right? And we're following these guys on what arguably looks very similar to the bridge at Khazad-dûm in Lord of the Rings, but that's cool. Compositional design, working beautifully, right? So we've got these stair steps of the props leading towards the temple door. We've got this large object blocking off the left of the frame. Why is it blocking off the left of the frame? Because we don't want the audience looking to the left. We want them looking to the right. Hence, highest area of contrast, right? Other than the characters, of course. The second highest area of contrast is their goal, right? So we can see that here. And then we have foreground, midground, which is the bridge and the temple, and background, which are these structures in the back. Foreground, midground, background. See how that's working? It's creating a sense of depth. This foreground, when I first saw this, for a split second I thought, whoa, that's large, right? Why is it so large in frame over here? I'll talk about triangles in a composition later. So it's like huge here, creating a triangle, right? Well, I'll talk about it now. Triangles trap the eye. So if you have a large triangle in the corner, what do I mean by trap the eye? They force people to look at it. They're like, oh, right? So when I first saw this, I'm like, why am I looking over here? And I was about to jump on the fact that it was bad compositional design, and then, threat reveal. The threat reveal is awesome in a couple of different ways. One, it's in silhouette, and two, it's right on the edge of frame, right? So we sort of pick it up coming in. And it mimics, psychologically, even though if we take a look at the shot, the silhouettes of the creatures take up full frame, right? Full frame. But it gives us the feeling that we caught movement out of the corner of our eyes. When we catch movement in our periphery, what ends up happening emotionally is we feel a rise of panic. Because our peripheral vision catching motion is one of our early warning systems, biologically hardwired, right? We're hardwired to kind of detect movement and then be ready to kind of glance in that direction. So there's like a half second of fight or flight instinct when we see movement out of the periphery, right? This mimics that beautifully, right? So we go, whoa, what was that, right? And the next shot is amazing. What happens in the next shot? Right? Because the shot designers, the sequence designers know that they've just surprised the audience, right? Boom. See that? Oh, Sam's here. Okay, cool. I'm going to mark you as present. So what happened in this shot that's really, really cool? Just there, right where I paused it. Yes, yeah, they reacted. Like we just reacted seconds ago. Right? But they're reacting to an element in the story. This is a beautiful camera cut. Now, I'm going to be talking about lots of different techniques when I break down the trailer. Not just compositional, not just lighting, not just shot design, but editorial and sound design and all kinds of stuff. Because it all sort of comes together, right? It's beautiful, beautiful cut. Because these characters are reacting the way we just reacted to that flurry of motion out of the corner of our eye. Boom, right? But then immediately with dialogue. Are you out of your mind? Right? So storytelling-wise, let's flip over to narrative, to the writer, right? So why start that shot with a dialogue, are you out of your mind? What does that do? It's like a clickbait hook. Not just to bring us back to what they're doing, right? Because when he says, are you out of your mind? Isn't your reaction, what? What are they doing? Whatever they're doing must be crazy. What is it? Like, there's that split second of curiosity. That's clever dialogue. These are the techniques you use to keep people turning pages, right? Oftentimes I'll have young writers ask, how do you keep people turning pages? How do you keep your writing or your storytelling from being boring, right? Well, you find storytelling moments that you've strung together, and you try to find these little hooks to keep the beat of the story going along. And this is an example of one of those hooks, right? It creates not mini suspense, I'll call it micro suspense. You got to create these moments of micro suspense, right? And that keeps that story ticking over. So now we get our first sort of taste of what their motives might be, right? So, first of all, we've got our two bad guys, right? So, what is the hierarchy between these guys? Who is the leader of this group? Also, remember, no decision. Sumo Warrior Nasruk. Why did I bother giving my little kind of disclaimer at the top of this session about being unafraid to speak your mind? I don't think I'm going to have a problem with this group. Okay, so first of all, we've got a shot. Now, we could have shot this many, many different ways, right? Many, many different ways. We could have done... the sumo guy on the left and the other guy, the rogue on the right, and our main character walking towards camera with determination. We could have done that. We could have done this a couple of different ways. But we are following behind our characters, right? And one of the things that you do to hide a character's intentions is to hide their face, right? So for another split second, because remember, we opened the shot with, "Are you out of your mind?" And now we see the back of the character. Because "Are you out of your mind?" makes us go, well, what's he doing? And then because we cannot see the character's face, we're continuing to think, what is he doing, right? Now, remember, animation's not arbitrary. Why did our main character shoulder check the rogue guy out of the way? It answers my original question, actually. Who is the leader of the group? So by this point, we know that this guy is the leader of the group because he has a commanding presence, right? He's not listening to orders being barked at him, right? He's not going to make it. And then he says he has to, right? So let's talk about this shot, right? Why are we in close on him? Why is it a close-up shot on just him? Emotions, very, very close, right? Very, very close. And I talk about, you'll probably hear me repeat this because I talk about this in shot design as well. It's a very, very simple formula based in real life. Oh, Tom's typing. I want to see what he has to say. You're close. No, Joe, it's definitely about emotions, right? But it's about understanding them. Yes, it does emphasize the line, right? But you can emphasize the line by making it louder, right? You could, there's a few other ways of emphasizing the line, but we cut close for a reason. So when you are in conversation with somebody, in real life, the closer you are to them, the more intimate the relationship is, right? So you probably keep your 2 meters distance when you're talking to your buddies. Family members, you're a little bit closer, within sort of like high five distance. And then with your partner, you're probably kissing distance close, right? So the closer you are to a person, the greater the emotional connection. The closer you are to a person as well, the more you understand what they're thinking. You ever have a conversation with somebody where it was really, really engaging and they might ask you a question or you guys might be talking about something cool that you did, and then you lean in, right? The close-up is the cinematic equivalent, psychologically, of leaning in. So we as an audience are leaning in closer. Now, think about how we built up to the close-up. Got a mid-shot. Are you out of your mind? We got a tracking shot, a following shot behind the character. We're following, and then close-up. Because we as an audience are thinking, what is going on? What's he doing? What's he up to? Right? We cut close. He has to. Now, that is another narrative trick, right? Because it could very easily, in the hands of a younger, more inexperienced writer, be a dialogue from the rogue guy. He's not going to make it. And then the response from our main character could be, he needs to. We need him. We can't do this without him. Right? How do you feel about that line? We can't do this without him. We need him. You should cringe a bit at that, and I'll explain why. Feels too long. Yes, feels too long. It's informational, right? So it's like exposition. It's also on-the-nose dialogue. Doesn't feel personal. Yes, doesn't feel personal because it's on-the-nose dialogue. On-the-nose dialogue is when a character says exactly what they're thinking. And how many of us have ever encountered in life people who say exactly what they're thinking? We never do it, right? That's why lines like, "Don't go through that door," are so cliche, right? Being opinionated is different. What I'm talking about, saying what you think, means things like, I'm going to get up out of this chair, I'm standing up now, and I'm going to go and do whatever, right? So you never say what you're actively thinking, sort of in a kinetic way. Being opinionated is a completely different thing. There's loads of characters who say exactly what they think, but there's usually an ulterior motive, right? So when someone says, that, you're kind of mistaken about that, this is actually the way things are, there's an internal motivation for that. It's the I have always got to be right, because through my entire life, everyone I cared about has always told me how wrong I was and has criticized everything that I've ever done. So now I'm on my own and I got to be right for every argument I'm in. So we'll get into that. It's about exploring the depth of the character, right? But bad dialogue scenes with that kind of speech. Yes, on-the-nose dialogue is awful, right? So what a writer does is tries to get into the mind of the character. Now, why is he has to more powerful than we need him? Why is it more powerful? Hey, buddy. Just teaching.
I'm going to tell you something.
In a minute.
I really need to tell you something.
Yeah, okay. What is it?
Can I delete Among Us from my tablet and get it on my Xbox? Because it's too hard to put on my tablet.
Yeah, I know. Ask me later. I'll think about it, okay? All right. Close the door for me. Thank you. All right. Okay. Yeah, so they're struggling, caring, desperate for him to make it. I don't know about that, right? I don't know about that. Because is he going, he has to, because, man, I can't carry this guy anymore. Dude, you've got a lot of weight on you. Right? So I don't think it's because he's struggling to carry him. Okay, it feels more desperate, has emotion to it, like it could mean they need him for a task. Or he cares about him and wants him to make it. That's the key. That's the key observation. Because he has to make it speaks to some weird kind of ulterior motivation. Like, he hasn't said it out loud, has he? He hasn't said it to his mates. He's almost like he's talking to himself, right? Because if he were to say, he needs to, he would have lifted his head maybe slightly or said it louder. He needs to. We need him, right? Like a command. But no, he's going, he has to. Like he's telling himself, like he needs him to, right? Or he wants him to make it. And he does care about him. We've seen evidence of that, right? So now our curiosity is suddenly piqued because this character's got some kind of emotional investment into the success of their mission or whatever it is, their little excursion, right? Okay, so let me continue forward. It's a wonderful moment to have the priest suddenly collapse to his knees because our guy has just said he has to. And then boom, the priest collapse, right? His vision blurs. Yes. So this is wonderful use of sort of visual metaphor. You'll see it quite a bit. Techniques that replicate disorientation and all that kind of stuff, right? Okay, so this is a wonderful shot and beautiful foreshadowing, right? Because what are we looking at? We're looking at his blood-caked hands. It accomplishes two things in the story, right? The first thing, the blood. The first thing that it tells us is how badly wounded our guy is, as if we needed that. We didn't really need that. I mean, the guy's barely standing. He collapses to his knees. We know he's badly injured, but this just hammers home the point. He's badly injured and he's bleeding out, right? Now, suddenly, the trailer has introduced a clock, right? In more ways than one. We've got the bad guys closing in on them, right? The denizens of the night or whatever, they're closing in on him. But we've got him bleeding out, which means they don't have a lot of time. Yes, when you first watch it, you assumed he was going to die. We should all have assumed he was going to die, hammered home by this shot. He's bleeding out. He's not going to make it, right? Somebody's bleeding out. You need to be making it to a doctor, not wandering deeper into the subterranean caverns of whatever, right? So, but it's also foreshadowing because the blood from his hand factors in later, doesn't it? Right? So there's a touch of foreshadowing. And I love that because in this shot, his bloody hands have one meaning, and in the next shot, they have a completely different meaning. That's why we devote a close-up to it. Remember what I said about Hitchcock's rule. The importance of an object is directly proportional to its size and frame, right? Cool. So now we've got the threat rushing from left to right, right? So I'll talk a little bit. I'm pointing out left to right for a reason. I'll talk about it in just a second, right? Doesn't it make it clearer for the viewer what happens too? Yes, it does. Yes, absolutely. That's called seeding a shot, right? So oftentimes, and that can sometimes be discovered when you have a story wall. Do you guys know what a story wall is? A story wall is where you take storyboards and you literally paste every panel on the wall. And you sit back and you look at it, and you can follow all the actions. The story wall is valuable because you can link one sort of visual information to another, right? So, for example, I could sit back and look at the story wall and go, okay, he's got his bloody hand and he's activating the thing that opens the door. Well, maybe, where can we seed it? Where can we put a seed? Where can we hint at that for a little bit more clarity, right? So we would have a discussion and say, how about this moment where he falls to his knees? He could look at his hands briefly, right? So that all kind of comes out in story meetings, right? By the way, the one thing I encourage you guys to move out of the private headspace of being creative on your own and try to share your ideas, right? I know that creativity is very much a solitary sort of experience. Oh, thank you. And a very private experience, but believe me, there's a wonderful joy that happens when you get a bunch of like-minded people together collaborating on a story, right? You find these little moments. Story meetings are my favorite meetings. I love it. I love bouncing things off of people. You get to a point where you're less precious about your idea and more about making that idea the best possible thing that you can with the help of people that you really trust. Right? So anyway, so yes, absolutely. So we're punctuating the importance of this. I'm gonna let this play through because I'm stopping every half second here. Or we're never gonna get through this. This was another moment that really hammers home our lead character's personality, right? Right? He goes, I know. Now, I don't think this was a writer or director choice. I believe this was an actor choice. So boom, we got somebody else in the collaborative mix contributing their ideas for storytelling. So the voice actor may have said, so for example, the director may have said, look, you're panicked, demons are coming, your mates are screaming, and you gotta go, look, I know, but you gotta open that door. And the actor may say, I want to be gentler than that. I want to be more fatherly, right? So I firmly believe that this is an actor choice, right? So again, somebody else in the creative mix, right? Ad-libbing could be ad-libbed, because remember, this is dialogue recorded before the animation process, right? So it's possible ad-libbing. I think ad-libbing is very, very important in the creative process. So when I write a script, I've written a few that have gone into production for cinematics, trailers, and things like that. I have always been fascinated by how that story evolves when you work with other people. And one of the things that I found, I used to be sort of very rigid about my dialogue. You got to say it exactly like I wrote it on the page. And that was wrong. That resulted in a lot of very stilted, unnatural performances. And then I evolved as somebody who gave direction and said, hey man, this is what I wrote. But what are you feeling? Like, you've really researched this character and studied. Like, how do you feel like he would respond? So I would do these ad-libbing sessions, because what ends up happening is natural dialogue suddenly comes out. I might go, if I have two actors, right, and the two actors are arguing about a gun, I'll go to one of the actors and whisper to them, throw them the gun suddenly. Just make up the mind in your head. Go, fine, take it, but don't say that out loud. Just suddenly throw the gun at your partner. See what happens, right? And that's a technique in acting called throwing your scene partner a bone, right? So, and this is based on an actual experience. So this actor did that and caught the other actor off guard, and we got this wonderful stumble catch. And then he goes back to trying to be a tough guy. And it was like this moment of revelation of the character. And I was like, yeah, let's keep that. That's really good, right? We've just seen through his facade at who the real person is underneath. So ad-libbing has its value. Oh my God, I said I was going to crank through this, wasn't I? Here I am stopping every second. All right, okay, let's go. The other thing, I do actually have to mention this, because it's a wonderful character moment, right? So that moment also speaks to how intelligent the character is in terms of understanding the human condition. Why is that? Well, I don't expect you to answer, because I'll walk you through it. We've got demons charging on them. We've got guys going, come on, we go, oh my God. We're going to die, we're all going to die. And then we have the priest going, I can't do it. And we have the main character surrounded by all this stress going, I know, you can do it, right? This is something that parents all over the planet know. When you have a kid who's freaking out, if you want them to calm down, you cannot freak out at them. You have to slow things down and speak very empathetically to get them to bring their volume down, right? So amidst all of this stuff going on, our character here is trying to slow things down. Makes you admire him even more. Now, why are we being forced to admire this guy? Why? I mean, he doesn't last through the whole thing. In fact, he's the first one to go. So why are we being convinced that he's a good guy? We like him. He's smart. He's kind. But like, why? Yes. For the double cross to be meaningful later. For his death to resonate with us later. Right? That's a nasty, nasty writer-director trick. Get your audience to care about a character, then kill them. Right? It just makes it much more impactful. Right? Because we're in the story. We're invested in the character. We're like, this guy's a pretty decent bloke. Right? So there we go. Very, very simple, very straightforward. And pretty obvious when we talk about it, right? Oh yeah, doesn't matter if it's just a thought, if there's no right or wrong. I like discussing these things. There are some things that you guys have taught me. That's the cliche teacher thing to say, eh? You guys have taught me as much as I taught you. But that's what I love about these open discussions, right? He's the only light in their situation. When he dies, that light is gone. Yes, absolutely. Yep, most definitely. Right? I love his character design. Let's talk about character design. I love his character design. Why? Because he has a patch over his eye. He's the character with a patch over his eye. Yet he understands more than the other three what is going on. He sees, the one-eyed guy sees more than anybody else in this opening sequence. I love that. That's so cool. I love it. I love it. Yes, yes. And then when he mutates into, like, the guy that we like the most, that's the purest of heart, becomes the vessel for the demon priest, right? Wow, that's great. Can you start to see all the levers and switches the Blizzard guys are pulling to really make this 9-minute trailer uber powerful? This is how you design cool. This is how you make people go, that was unforgettable. That was awesome, right? He's clearly a pirate. Yeah, that too. Yep. Clearly. Now, here's an animator thing, right? Animator thing. Now, watch this really, really carefully. I love looking at a performance, right? I want you guys to watch this very carefully, right? Watch his pupils and listen to the dialogue, right? Watch his pupils and listen to the dialogue, right? Watch. Did you see what he did with his eyes? Yes, his pupils widen. But there's another technique here. That's just, he looked to the side. Or more specifically, where did he look? I'll play that again. Oh, a little bit earlier. See that? Behind the priest. He looked behind the priest at what? Yes, he did. Yes. Yes. Danger. Yes. And then he looked back and said, now, break the seal. Right? That's wonderful. And probably a combination of the performance and the animator, right? Because it shows a thought process. When you're animating characters, you're not animating characters. You're creating living, breathing people. And we have to believe that. So what this guy's internal thought process is, I have to convince this priest to calm down. I think he's calm. Now let me check the danger situation. Oh, I better get over there. Okay, you got to break the seal. So it's this thought process, beat by beat. It also hammers home that this character is fairly intelligent because he's analyzing everything and he's making decisions based on information. And all that through a simple pupil shift, right? A simple change of eye line, right? As we get deeper into the animation portion of the course, you will understand how important minutiae of movement is in terms of creating character, right? Beautiful work by the facial animators that worked on this character. That look tells us this priest isn't as squeaky clean as we thought. Now, these guys are facing right to left. Let's talk a little bit about that, right? First of all, again, a note about hierarchy, right? Hierarchy. So those guys on the side don't get into attack position until the center guy draws his sword. Now we definitely know he's the leader. He's in the middle. He's got the highest contrast light against highest contrast dark, and he's drawn his weapon, and the other two react. So he's the leader of the group, right? It's like what we talked about with the concept art about right to left being uncomfortable. Yes, thank you. Glad you remember that. Absolutely. These guys are definitely in danger. And we as an audience feel that on a subconscious level because they're looking from right to left, right? So we know that their goose is cooked. We talked about this shot last class, the disorientation of the Dutch tilt, right? Okay, so I've used this techniques many times before. Okay, so our priest is reading whatever, not Sanskrit or whatever runes that are carved into this wall, right? Where is the answer? Well, actually, let's watch this, right? Where does he read up to? He's reading. Right here, right? The answer is close to us. What he's looking for is right in front of our nose, right? That's beautiful shot design. I love it. That's really cool, right? So it gets us involved in this particular moment for the priest, right? The good old Russian camera. I love that. That's cool. This is wonderful. I love the camera rotation. Do you see that slight rotation on the camera? Oh my God, that's so good. I love it. Right? Watch that. See the slight rotation? Right? Do you see how that emphasizes the attack moment? Because now, even though they're on a horizontal plane, visually they're fighting uphill, and the enemy is raining down upon them. Talk about taking a simple shot and amplifying it to 11, right? That's so good. Really good. Yeah, it's like they're going to overpower them immediately. Absolutely. It's like a wave crashing down on them. Boom. Right? So I'm gonna let it play through because I have a feeling I'm not gonna finish this trailer. Holy cow, we've been at it for like an hour and a half, right? But notice he saves the guy that's going to eventually betray him. Did you guys catch that? Really super quick, right? Boom, saves his life. The guy who's eventually going to betray him. There we go. I love that little beat because it's a difference in personality, right? So it also shows that the ogre guy might not be as dumb and as thick as you think. Well, he is, but he's just like, yeah, I get it. You don't have to explain it to me. Hand here, boom, that's it. Right? This is also foreshadowing to where they actually end up inside the chamber, right? So anyway, there's your basic door opening. We're following the blood. We've seen that shot a gazillion times. Whether it's a weapon being forged or something, we see that liquid going through all these troughs and machinery. So that was the decision. The moment that was a key decision. So when they go in, that's a key decision moment in the story. Absolutely key. Because we can tell from his look, and we can tell by the reverse angle, that he isn't necessarily dead already. Right? So there is a moment of indecision in the priest. And this was my first clue in terms of character, that he might not be entirely a good guy. Before cutting the door, see, there was a nod of agreement from the ogre guy. So oftentimes, and I think I'm going to have to stop here, but I'll end on this. Right? I promise we will pick up more of this, but I will start to devote only a half hour of time to every time we take a look at this. Right? So this nod of agreement is the best example. So the ogre guy nods with agreement, then cuts the chain, lowers the door. But it's the best example of how crucial backstory is, right? Now, it's polarizing, this opinion of whether or not to create backstory. Backstory is a waste of time. and I heard that and I understand that. The answer is not you got to have backstory. You don't need backstory. It's not as clear as that. It really kind of depends on you, what you need for your story at the time, how to craft the best experience, right? I'm a personal fan of backstory, not because I think you need it or not. It's just fun. It's just fun. I just love it. I love thinking about my characters to the nth degree. I love living inside my head. Like when somebody says, "Do you need backstory or not?" I'm like, why would you not want to, right? And yes, you can take it too far, right? You can. I'm not going to sit here and think about the structure of the religious cult and the history of what led to this moment. Well, actually, I might. I'm not going to think about the political landscape and who's the king of this particular realm at the time, and that's way too far. But what I will do is I'll think about the fact that maybe this ogre guy, the rogue guy, made plans for betrayal long before they started on this particular quest. And that nod tells me that they have, right? So we get a sense of history. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the sense of history that backstory creates. And how important it is, and then I'll tie it to visual studies. So when you create a backstory, what you create are emotional, dramatic moments outside the scope of the story, right? So here's how this works, and it works beautifully. So he nods to his buddy, indicating to us that they probably talked at an earlier time and made the plan to betray the leader. We can see that a little bit in their back and forth, right? Which tells me that this little story we're experiencing is part of a much larger story. So we have just designed more story than's contained inside of what we're showing to our audience, right? This is important in design as well, right? So oftentimes we'll design, and I'm sure you guys run into this. You'll design like a mountain scene or whatever, or like an outdoor scene, and it'll just be from the viewpoint of the camera, and you're not thinking about things outside the camera, right? So I'll oftentimes say, to a 3D layout artist, why don't you put a gobo on a light with a tree shadow and cast tree shadows in here? Why don't you cast a building shadow in here? And there's nothing else in the 3D world, but you're faking it. You're faking the sense that camera is taking a small little snapshot of a much, much larger world. It's the same thing with storytelling. Backstory allows you to convince the audience that your little trailer is a snapshot of a much, much larger world. Yes, that the world is lived in, that the world has gone on before you and will go on after you, and we are just taking this little moment in time and studying this one dramatic moment, right? So that's the importance to me of backstory. And again, you don't have to create huge amounts. It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to achieve. So for example, I might not write any backstory and then go, well, these two guys betray each other. Why did these two guys betray the leader? Why did they betray the leader? Okay, I'm going to have to go and write a page or two of their backstory to sort of figure it out. And then what ends up happening is if I figure out a good backstory, I can sit with the animators and say, look, this is what happened. This is where these guys are coming from. They're actually planning on doing this, right? They're not betraying the leader so they can get the gold to save their poor old sick mother, right? So there's something going on there. But again, if I'd written that, actually, if I'd have said, maybe these two guys are brothers, right? And they're trying to save their sick mother, their unconscious signals to each other, their nonverbal signals to each other would be a little bit different, wouldn't they? So backstory affects performance, affects animation, affects a lot of things, right? So we'll kind of leave it at that. We'll leave it at the moment of the leader's betrayal, and then we'll try to pick it up after that, right? So right after this moment. Okay, I did not intend to go on this long, but I hope that you guys got a lot out of that. Any questions or comments on that so far? Yeah, cool. I'm glad you thought so. It's, again, shot design is like one of my favorite things to do. Okay. So I'm just going to flip over now into Photoshop land, right? And we'll open up a 4K. And the first thing I'm going to do inside of Photoshop, is first of all, show it to you guys on the tutorial display. I think that might be helpful, hey? So let's do that. And I'm going to stop streaming so I can start on a different screen in here. And you guys can check it out. Okay. So that was our journey with that. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about sort of character design, right? Okay, so I'm inside of Photoshop. The very first thing I did was create a new canvas, and it's a 4K canvas, which actually might be, you know what, we don't need to be that big, actually, not at this particular stage. So I'm going to come over to my image, and I'm going to go to my image size, and let's take this down. So the image size utility works this way, right? You can have this lock here that will constrain the proportions or the ratio of the image. So I'm going to leave that locked in. You can make custom sizes or whatever. But I'm going to do it at 1920 by 1080, right? So sort of half res. Right? And I'm going to use the Control plus and minus key to zoom in and out, which I've mapped to my Cintiq keys. And the first thing I'm going to do is kill the white. So I'm going to go into my background layer. I'm going to choose a gray, and I'm going to hit Alt-Delete. Now, Alt-Delete and Control-Delete will fill your canvas with either the foreground color or the background color. So when I hit Alt-Delete, it's this one. If I hit Control-Delete, it's the other one, right? So I'm going to fill it with this, and then I'm going to flip to the other color, and I'm going to set that to a slightly darker shade, and then I'm going to bring my brush size down. Control 0 frames the whole canvas. Let's check it out. I don't think I've ever used that. Hey, nice. That's cool. All right. Okay. So I just want to make sure the brush size is working for me. And I usually leave the safe frame guides on. So let me use Control 0. Control 0. So the safe frame, right? So what are these guidelines? Any of you guys study safe frames in, AV class or video production studies or whatever it is you guys take for video production? Do you guys know what the safe frames are? Yeah, okay. So menu UI. Okay, yeah. I'll tell you the backstory behind this, right? Okay, so when you take a look at a television monitor, right, or an LCD monitor or a computer monitor or whatever, right, you have your glass, which shows the true kind of ratio of the screen, but then the case, the plastic frame, has to hold that glass in, right? And so the frame of the television box is actually a lot larger than the screen. Obviously, to hold that screen in, keep it from dropping out, right? So that frame actually can block action or titles, right? That are close to the edge. So this canvas size might be the true size of the glass, and then your frame might be like that big. So you got this space kind of holding the glass in, right? So if we have something like, A Demon Among Us, right? And you've got that title, right? Right. So what a lot of other audiences watching it on an older TV might see is that might be blocked off by their frame. They might say a demo. They might see a demo Among Us, right? So this grid lines are for safe action and safe title, right? So the inside frame is for safe action. So if you put your action inside this frame, so like if a character's throwing a punch, right? And they throw the punch like this, right? The audience is going to miss what happened, right? Unless you keep that inside the safe frame. So if I were to take this and then just sort of move it over, I drew on the background layer. But you get the idea, right? The outside square is the safe title. Now, technology has gotten to the point where we don't need that anymore. So in LCD TV, what you see is what you get. There's no frame blocking off any text and anything like that. But I keep these as well because compositionally, compositionally, these areas here are a blind spot, right? So people generally don't look towards the edges of the frame. And if you design towards the edges of the frame, you'll have a very tight composition. So I keep these guys on, right? So that when I cross into those areas, it's very, very deliberate, right? But I also come into my view and I turn off snapping. Because if I have snapping on, right, it'll, as I get to that line, see it? It's snapping to that line, and it's just super frustrating, right? So I'm going to go over to view, and I'm going to turn off snapping. Now you can get rid of those guys by going to view and clear guides. So that will get rid of it, right? So those guides are now gone, right? So if you prefer just working traditionally in a nice big open canvas, that's how you do it. So that's that setup. So let's come in here and get warmed up. I have a couple of things in mind that I'd like to sort of approach today. Again, I'm not doing any, I don't have any sort of rhyme or reason for what I'm drawing. I'm just sort of winging it a little bit. I've been starting off a lot with male characters. I think I spent so many years just trying to master the female character that I feel like I've sort of lost a little bit of how to draw really kind of cool looking, engaging sort of male characters. So I think I've spent the last sort of little while kind of focusing on that, right? Now, here's the importance of sort of pre-thinking a pose, right? Because now I'm stuck. It's like, what do I do with the arms? And it's because I haven't really thought about who this character is. I haven't really gotten into the character's head. I haven't really spent some time going, what are they doing, right? And that's generally why most people get stuck, drawing a character, right? If you take a heartbeat's time to think, who is this character? What is their personality? What are they doing right now? Then it becomes clearer. So for example, I'm stuck, and the first thing I think is holding a weapon. But if you think that, suddenly you know exactly where you're going to put the arms, right? So I'm not going to do that. I think I don't know what I'm going to do, but that's okay. You don't have to know. You can just sort of experiment. Maybe he's getting ready for combat or something. I don't know. You know what? Maybe I will give him a weapon. It's nice and easy to have a prop for your characters to kind of hold on to. So let's break down what I've just done, and I'm going to make a couple of adjustments here, right? So notice how loose and scribbly I'm doing this. I also know that I've just drawn on the background. Man. All right, so let's kind of get this into sort of an area that we can work with. So I'm going to just yeah, you know what? I should have just I'm using polygonal lasso, but that's cool. So I've sort of taken this lasso tool. Now you have another lasso tool in here, just a regular lasso tool. And what this allows you to do is exactly what I've just done, right? Is to just draw a selection around your sketch. Now I'm going to use the layering system to my advantage. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to right click here. And when you right click on your selection, you got a whole bunch of selection specific options, right? That you can play with. So I can right click here and I can create a new layer via a copy of this one, or I can create a new layer via cut. So I'm going to do a new layer via cut, right? So what ends up happening is this guy is sitting on the layer over top of this gray, right? So that's cool. Now I can take this, and if I hit the V key or click on this move icon, I can move this guy wherever I want, right? And if I turn on the layer underneath, I'm just moving the top layer wherever I want, right? So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to color code this layer because visually it just kind of helps me identify it super quick. I'm going to come over here, I'm going to increase my layers palette because I just need this at a thumbnail scale. And I'm going to right click on the layer and I'm going to, I don't know, make this blue, right? And I'll keep the background layer as is. So one of the biggest things that you guys will run into using Photoshop for the first time is just kind of understanding which layer you're on at any given point. And there's nothing I can teach about that. You just have to get used to clicking a layer, drawing, checking your layers, making sure you're on the right layer, right? Okay, so now here's the importance of flipping, right? And I can see it plainly evident right now, but watch this. So I'm going to zoom this guy out. What I'll probably do, I don't really do this because I like to design a number of thumbnails, but I think we're running behind because of the Diablo analysis, so I'm just going to work with this one. So let's say we got that, right? Now, watch what happens when I go to image, image rotation, flip canvas horizontal. Well, it's actually not too bad. I was expecting the character to lean forward a lot more, right? But it isn't too bad. There's still a little bit of a lean. If I go back, there's actually more of a lean this way, I think, than the other way, right? So if I come back here, image rotation, flip horizontal, right? Now, I'm going to need this a lot while I'm designing. So I want to map this to a hotkey, right? Hey, buddy, how's it going?
Have you think about it yet?
Yeah, I'll talk to you after lunch, okay?
After lunch, but that's 4 hours.
It's 4 hours, I know. It's a crazy amount of time. Patience, my young Jedi.
Can you please tell me yes or no?
Let me think about it. I haven't had a chance to think about it because I'm teaching, right? Let me think about it. Okay?
When you've done teaching, have you think?
I will. I promise. All right? Close the door, please. Thank you. All right. Okay, so I'm back in. Okay, so where was I? Yeah. So I want to map this canvas flipping onto one of my hotkeys on the Wacom tablet. So I'll show you how this works, right? This is, again, part of the software setup thing that I went through in Maya. You got to do this with pretty much every digital tool, and it's worth it. Take the time to set these things up properly. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to my, I believe it's under the Edit menu. Yeah, Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, right? So thankfully, Photoshop organizes this based on the menu that's in the UI, right? So I can just come over to my image, and then there should be a rotate, and then flip canvas horizontal. And you can see I have no hotkey attached to it, right? So when I try to find a hotkey, a lot of software that has keyboard customization, hotkey customization, they already have a whole bunch of hotkeys. And you ever run into the problem where you're trying to set up a new hotkey and then the software goes, that already exists, it does this, right? So I try to use Control, Alt, and Shift because I know that 3 combination I have a better chance of not running into a conflict with another hotkey. So for the flip horizontal, I'm going to go Control, Alt, Shift, H, and there's no conflict. That's cool. But I don't need to remember that because here is why I'm creating it, right? So I'm going to come down here to, it's opened off screen, but I'll drag it over. So I've opened up my Wacom tablet properties, right? And I'm checking the properties of my tablet set for Photoshop. I'm going to go to the function keys, actually set for Photoshop. And I've got my undo. Now I've got my radial monitor menu. I don't need the radial menu. I never use it. So I'm going to set this to a keyboard keystroke. It's going to be my Control, Alt, Shift, H, right? And this will be my flip, right? And then that's set, and this guy's set. So let's test it out. And let's see, Control, Alt, Shift, H. Did I mess that up? I think I might have messed it up. Let's take a look. Keyboard, keystroke, Control, Alt, Shift, H. Okay, so why are you not working, buddy? It says we're flipping, but it's doing Control Alt Shift. It's not picking up the H. Let's try this again. Control Alt Shift H. No! Why are you making my life hell? It's doing the Alt instead. Okay, well, we'll continue on. Why is that not working? Crikey. All right. So the flipping, at least I got it tied to a hotkey now, so I can just hit it. So I have a suspicion that we want to go slightly that way, and I'm going to have to adjust the feet position for it. Right? I'll do the Control-Alt. That feels better. Feels rock solid. Right? Now, I'll talk a little bit about drawing technique and how that relates to you guys. Okay, so I'm going to pop back out, and we'll take a look at, I'll create another layer so I can kill this quite easily. So remember, I was teaching you guys about kind of the head ball, the torso ball, the pelvis ball, shoulder balls, and then the knees, and then that, right? And this is equidistant apart, right? That's all factored into my rough sketch, and I'll walk you guys through this really slowly. I'm going to take the opacity of this, turn it down a little bit, right? And I'll walk you through my process, right? So if we take a look at this guy, and see how loose and how rough I'm sketching this guy, and I'm making mistakes and correcting them on the drawing, right? This takes an incredible amount of discipline to break out of the old habits of like, my drawing's got to be perfect right off the bat, right? No, it doesn't, right? You can see how many construction lines or tools I'm giving myself to be able to execute this character, right? So here we go. If we go into the top, we'll start at the top. You can see I've got the head ball already in place. Now I'm doing something that I'm forcing myself to do. For the longest time, I just drew the head as an oval, right? Well, actually, I started off with the head as a circle. We all start off with the head as a circle. The head is not a circle. It's not. We have this perception that it is, but it's not, okay? So the first stage that I kind of got used to is this idea of drawing an oval. The second stage, which is a little bit more difficult to achieve, is sort of this weird triangle shape. Kind of like a bike helmet, right? Something like that. I'm trying to achieve that shape. That's a cleaner, clearer, basic shape of the human head than just a circle or an oval, right? So what that tells me is it's not about a right or a wrong shape. It tells me that as I'm drawing the human head, I need to push certain things, right? So I've come through here. You can see I've got this oval coming up this way, and I come down this way. I've squared it off a little bit because of the jaw, right? And I'm doing this because the head's 3/4 turn this way, and most of the detail is kind of on this side, right? So you modify the oval just a little bit to kind of give certain indications, like which way is the head turned, or is it facing up or down, or this kind of a thing. So there's tiny little things you can do that'll kind of help sell the direction that you're planning on mapping the face to, if that makes sense. So let me go down and break down the human head, and I'll show you why it's not a circle. And it's not a big deal. We all, as kids, we all start drawing the human head as a circle, because we are used to interpreting the world in simple shapes, which is not a bad thing. I'll talk about the importance of shape language later. But as we start to create more sophisticated character designs, we have to understand a few things about the human head. Right? So first of all, right, the best way to look at it is from sort of this point of view, right? The human head is not a circle. It is actually an oval. Ugh, that's horribly proportioned square, but you guys get the idea, right? And inside of a grid like this, the oval bit of the human head fits in the upper quadrant, and then the jaw drops down, right? That's how it typically works. And I know I'm uber simplifying it, but I'm trying to give you some shapes that you can digest and understand, right? So, the ear or the auditory meatus, sits here, round about here, in this quadrant of that square, right? That's it. No more. I'm all about simplifying proportional canons to just those things that you need, right? Let's look at the top down of the head, right? People get this wrong all the time. Okay, so we're looking top down on the head. So that's a bird's eye view of a human head. Which way is that character facing? No idea, right? So, this is your first introduction. Oh, I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. Side profile. No. Side, I'm not, sorry, I'm not, side profile. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that. Are you talking about this or this? I'll move on, actually. Because this is, I meant to draw top down. This is a bird's eye view. Oh, the first. Yeah. Did I mention that it was a side profile? Sorry. This is the side of the human head, right? So you got the eye here kind of thing, right? And the nose, whatever, right? So that's the side profile. Sorry, if I forgot to mention that, my apologies. So this one. Now, let's talk about top down, right? So, this is the top down of a human head, right? We're looking from bird's eye view. Which way is this head facing? Well, we don't know, but we kind of get a little bit more of a sense of which way that head is facing, right? I hope you guys see, yeah, upward. Thank you. Hopefully you guys see upward. This is the principle of draft in, yeah, I'll get into that. This is the principle of draft for any kind of character anatomy, right? So if I put the ears here, right, and then the nose there, it starts to make a little bit more sense, right? You know, and the eyes might be here, and the character's looking that way. I've super exaggerated, by the way. But the principle of draft states something that might be obvious, but you guys haven't realized. But we are designed aerodynamically. We are designed to be able to travel cleanly and easily through the density of the air around us, right? So therefore, we are designed aerodynamically moving forward, right? So our head is basically more egg-shaped so that air can kind of break and circulate around us, with the nose being sort of the pinnacle and then the ears flaring out. They act kind of like spoilers, not really, but if you think about it that way, it'll help you in terms of thinking about this design. Now, if you think about it, everything down the front of the human body is designed aerodynamically. Our chest, our torso, our chest and our abdominals are thinner than our back and our latissimus dorsi, right? So our back is wider. The front vulnerable bits of the human body are all protected by, if you think about our back as acting like a turtle shell, which to a certain degree it is, you'll understand why it's a lot wider than the front of the body. And that's in every piece of anatomy. The bicep is actually thinner than the long head and short head tricep muscle, which bracket it on either side. So we're designed to aerodynamically travel easier this way, right? Opposite for the forearm going this way. So we've got a thin knife edge to the hand, right? And thicker here, et cetera, et cetera. So everywhere in our human body, we are designed aerodynamically. Our calves, sort of our gastrocnemius muscles, the calf muscles, are thicker and they sort of taper towards the shin, and the shin moves forward through air, right? This is the one thing that's missing in a lot of early attempts at character design, this whole idea and principle of draft, right? Which is why I spend a little bit of time talking about the basic proportional canons of the human head, because this is the first area that kind of needs attention. Now, having said all that, this is not easy to do, right? It seems easy, deceptively simple, but you will spend most of your time going, human head, right? I did, right? It's very, very difficult to kind of capture that in the beginning. And then if you slow down, you go, oh, okay, Al says I got to draw more of kind of an oval shape. And you're like, oh, that's not really an oval shape. And you'll struggle. You will struggle, right? So this takes time and practice, right? What about the front-on then? I don't want to get into that because have you guys seen the front-on face thing with the triangle and the pupils and all this kind of business? Maybe I'll talk to you about my simplification of it, right? So the simplification of it, not, again, I have to say I'm not negating proportional canons. They are of value, right? But it's like, it's something that you can intuit and incorporate it into your drawing tool set once you get a little bit more advanced with the basics. I find that a lot of drawing tutorials don't do this. They overload you with far too much, far too early. So I'm hoping that I'm peeling back the layers a little bit better. Eyes, mouth, and nose. Yes. So actually I won't draw it. I'll just describe it to you. So the lines that I think are the most important for me, the bottom of the nose, and I don't draw this. I use my own face. I'll just draw a line and find out where the ears sit in relationship to where my nose is, and then the corners of the eyes, and where do they hit on the tips of the ears, right? And then the centers of the pupil hit the corners of the mouth. That's it, right? Yeah. Most face proportions are taught in traditional art class, right? But really, I just look for the pupils going to the corners of the mouth. And of course, you can break those depending on the personality of the character. So the corners of the mouth hitting the center pupils of the eyes is my baseline for the mouth, and then I'll go wider or smaller depending on the character's personality, right? And then just the alignment of the ears to the nose, the ears to the corners of the eyes. That's all I use. And that kind of helps me out, right? Now notice if you look at the center of the face, if I were to do the center of the face, which arguably begins at what's called the zygomatic process, or your brow bone here, right? And if I hold my fingers here, can you see that actually the width of my face? Let's see if it's being shown. If I hold here to where my masseter muscles are and the zygomatic process, it's actually smaller than the rest of my head, right? Again, that's that principle of draft. So your facial features are actually smaller, and the skull and the ears kind of bracket it, right? It's probably super subtle, but it's there, right? I've oftentimes been accused of having a very big head, but that's a whole other issue. So let's go back to my initial sketch, because I bombed it out quick, and probably some of you were like, oh my god, right? So I'll tell you, one of the things that kind of helped me is I have practiced. Let me bring this. I want to bring the initial layer back, just so that I can. I'll delete all the gubbins. I'm going to grab that lasso tool. I'm just going to draw a lasso around the whole thing here, and then just delete that. And then Control D is my deselect. So Control D, right? Control D to deselect, right? Oh, that's existing on. What the heck? Where is... Oh, it's on the background. Okay, so let's turn that off, and I will go Control Delete, fill the whole thing with gray, and I'll light these guys up again. Okay, so back to this, right? So there is my shoulder line, there's my waistline, and then there's my knees, right? And because the lines are fanning out this way, right, I know that it'll be tighter here and then wider here, but I'm still subconsciously trying to maintain that equidistant thing, right? So that's there. That's there when I do the initial rough sketch. It's there because I've practiced it and practiced it and practiced it. And my animation teacher forced me to, like I will be forcing you to measure that over and over again. It is the most useful proportional canon to have operating on the subconscious, right? How do you get things to operate on the subconscious? You do it again and again and again and again and again and again, right? Then it becomes embedded in the subconscious, right? So that's there. Obviously, I don't stick to it exactly. The knees are a little bit lower, but that's okay, as long as you're reasonably close, right? The last thing, again, I want you to do is measure anything, right? So we'll kill that. Now comes the next sort of important line. Actually, let me undo that. I will just turn the opacity down, because it's important that we can reference this a little bit later. So the next thing that I am subconsciously doing, because I've drawn it over and over and over again, is the center line, right? The center line. The center line is incredibly helpful for you guys, right? Because of the fact that it shows two things. The direction the body is facing and the thickness of the body, right? So I'll show you, right? So if we come over here, yeah, I agree with all that. The center line is so important. It's absolutely important, right? So you know about the construction lines on the head. So if I'm drawing the torso, right? I used to draw it dead center, right? Even that looks off. Let's say, well, because my first torsos were just ovals, to be honest. It was just this. And I draw a center line like that, right? But it doesn't really clearly show the direction the torso is facing, maybe just a little bit, and the thickness, right? So if I were to, a line of action, I'll go into that in just a second. So if I were to kind of draw it like this, notice how suddenly I get a clear sense of the direction the torso is facing, but I get a feeling that there's thickness to it. Like this bit is thick, right? So there's volume to it, right? Just by that simple placement of the center line, right? So I get that sort of visualization, right? So the center line. Now, line of action is also a huge topic, right? So I will talk about that at length. It's not that easy for me to explain in this pose because I'm using an S-curve which has a subtle line all the way down to the planted heel. And I don't want to talk about that because it's difficult to identify. It's easier to spot the line of action in a pose that's more action-based. Sorry, I'll pause there because I was reading. Isn't it creating perception of depth? That as well, yes, yeah. That's the other thing. Actually, I'm not lecturing because I've forgotten about it because I'm so used to it. But I've drawn many, many, many perspective grids. So when I'm drawing, I'm also subconsciously working perspective in. So let's talk kind of a little bit about that, right? So there is perspective on this character, right? And it is subtle, but I put it in for a particular reason. So when I started drawing, I maybe made the decision when I started drawing this area. So I'm drawing the trapezius and I'm knowing this is a muscle-bound guy. So I say to myself, let's look up at him. So he's much more powerful, right? Hands and legs, kind of, right? It's a lot simpler than that. It's the curvature, right? So I'll show you what I mean. So one of the things I used to do quite often as a mistake when I was a kid is that, I draw a character, right? And they'd have a neckline like this, and they'd be standing here, and then I draw the waist like that, right? And then I draw a hole for the leg, and the leg would come down, right? And then I draw boots, and the boots would be like this, right? And that would be the cuff of the boot. Notice what's happening, right? I'm getting, the curvature is going up and then down, right? It's going all over the place, right? So the character has no perspective, and it's looking, the perspective changes are incorrect in that particular drawing. It was a really, really good art teacher that pointed out to me, if you start getting the curvature on the body correct, everything else will start to fall in place. And at first, it was difficult to do because, let's take a look at the neck. This was the hardest part for me because I was like, okay, I want it to be an upshot. I got the boot cuff going the right way. That's cool, right? So the boots are going up, the waist is going up, but I want to draw the neckline like this, right? Took me a long time to go, I'm just going to draw the neckline like that. I had to force myself against my will to kind of do that, And then it's like, well, now I'm actually definitely looking up at the character, right? By those simple curvature changes, right? That curvature change and overlapping lines, the simplest of lines, will change our perception on things. So I'm going to talk to you about the beam afterward. I think I did talk about the beam a little bit in terms of overlapping line. But yeah, the perspective is sort of built into the character. Now I'm hoping that you can, the beam. I'm hoping now that you can see that here and just ever so subtly here, right? So that is giving that subtle impression that we're looking up at the character. And I'm going to have to put boot lines like that, and then we have an upshot on the character. The beam. Spend a little time on the beam, right? So if I were to draw a beam like this, which way is that beam facing? Very, very difficult to tell, right? If I were to draw the beam like this, or, whoops, that's awful. A beam like that, right? Suddenly we have a clearer idea of which way that beam is facing, simply based on an overlap of two lines, right? That's how powerful that technique is. How have you been? Oh my God, so many comedians in this class. One quick sec. I have to recheck the time. I got you guys till 12. Okay, so I'll finish off. Just really, damn, I really wanted to dive into this guy. Okay, so I'll stop very, very briefly. Well, I'll just finish off really briefly with this. I've got to do the dishes. Sadly, nobody else in my family is willing to do it. No problem, no problem. I've gone over. Right, we're supposed to end at 12. If I go on, guys, after the session, it's up to you guys whether or not you want to stick around for my closing thoughts or need to take off. But it's on Twitch as well, right? So you can refer to the Twitch stream and hopefully get caught up on this. But what I wanted to talk about is it's going to seem like a massive leap from perspective and line work and line of action and things like that. But the next most important thing is anatomy. Anatomy, right? So, in my head, once I've got the action line figured out and the center line and the shoulders, waist, knees, the next thing that I rough out is sort of a shorthand for anatomy. So here I'm drawing what's called the sternocleidomastoid muscle, right? And then I'm coming across here with the clavicles, and I've got the trapezius muscles back here, and here are the pectorals, right? And then I've got the posterior, anterior, and medial deltoid muscles here, right? And I'm doing a shorthand of the latissimus dorsi, and coming through across the obliques, right? Center line, the abdominal muscles, etc., etc. You get the idea, right? And then there's the bicep. Everyone knows the bicep, right? Right? So I'm just starting to kind of rough in the character a little bit, like this, right? Anatomy is incredibly important to learn, right? Incredibly important, right? Because as a concept artist, you can be hired and work in a studio and not know anatomy. But if you are a concept artist and you know anatomy, that adds one more zero to the back of your paycheck. Yes, it plays a part in 3D too. I'm dead serious. Anatomy will add another zero to your salary. And that's always good. That's the best way to look at it. You need to know your anatomy. The anatomy is the base of every character design. Yes, I'm glad you guys agree. No matter how realistic. Yeah, it's in there in cartoon characters. I don't have time to go into it now, but I will show you. In cartoon characters, it's a shorthand for anatomy, but yes, it is there, right? So, I can't resist. So even if you were to draw kind of a simple character, right? It's a humanoid character, to be fair. But I've got an elbow, and I've got the brachioradialis there, right? Oh, and I've got the deltoid there, right? So you'll see it when you look at cartoon characters. It might be like really subtle, but it's there, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. I think I'm going to save this. It was just going to be a lecture drawing, but I kind of want to build this character up. Something about the basic shape is really sort of working for me. And I guess I can continue building on this to talk a little bit about just my process in terms of taking this to a final. I might go ahead and finish this, so we'll tune in on Wednesday. It might already be done, and I might have to start another one. I have a tendency to do that, so I apologize in advance. But I'll try to stay away from this and kind of build it up with you guys in class. In class, we will start our first session of life drawing as well next week, right? So I'll teach you guys how to break down the human body. Also, one thing, life drawing is intimidating for everybody. Not just you guys who've never done it before, for everybody. Life drawing is about the hardest thing you can do as an artist. It really, just when you get to the point where you think you're a pretty decent artist, life drawing comes along and reminds you that you can't draw. It's just the nature of the beast. Yes, it's rough. Life drawing is really rough. So, in that regard, I am going to try again to show you some tips and tricks and things to look for to get your life drawings up to a particular level, right? So don't feel intimidated. Yes, life drawing makes me feel like an amateur again as well, and I've been doing this 20 odd years. So yeah, it's definitely it's a reminder. It's a humbler, definitely a humbler. But we'll talk a little bit about that next class, and then we'll start regular life drawing sessions as well. Okay, so I'm gonna let you go. It's not too bad today. I've only gone 10 minutes over, but I think we're all right. Okay. So that's it. No more closing thoughts. I will let you guys go, and then we'll meet up again for animation class later this week. So all good. Okay, take care, guys. We'll talk to you later. Cheers. And then off the Twitch stream as well, I will let you guys go. I got more adverts popping in. That's the only thing I seem to get off my Twitch stream. People trying to sell me stuff. So I'm going to end this stream. But we'll catch you on in a couple. We'll catch up with you in a couple of days, and we'll